Hello.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Daniel. Hey, Karim.
Thanks for letting me in.
Of course.
You have a waiting room for this one?
We do, yeah. So I'm going to keep a close eye on things this time. How are y'all doing?
Doing all right.
Yes.
And bye. How about you, Chris?
That's good. It's been a busy one. Lots of meetings. So, hey, Karim, I was going to ask when you get a chance. Would love to get a copy of your presentation from a few weeks back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I thought I sent it as a link to the USL, but I'll just resend it.
Oh, maybe you did. Maybe, yeah. But if you could,
I'll just take a look. Yeah, I'll make a note to resend it to you.
So we have a new faculty fellow who's like really interested in your work. So
just share. Thank you. Yeah, if they want to just email me directly, they can feel free.
Okay. Great.
I have to redo some of the citations for some of the conferences, so I'm gonna redo that. I asked the library, and the library said that New School usually uses Chicago. Does the lab have a preference of citations? Because
it just depends on the publication.
They want APA.
Right. I think APA is great. Yeah. It just really depends on the journal usually when we're submitting stuff. So
yeah,
often it's tedious footnotes.
Yeah, that's kind of what they want. But the lab doesn't have like an official policy.
No.
Okay.
No official. Yeah. Everyone, welcome. Jen.
Hi, everyone. I keep struggling with like lighting from the front. I can't figure it out. It gets dark so early now. Kareem, you're in the dark too.
Yeah, I rely on the brightness of my screen. It only works if I have like a white background. If I have something darker in the background, or if the Zoom screen goes dark for some reason, so I'm reflecting someone else's darkness.
Yeah, I could turn up the brightness on my screen and then like lean in, right?
Yeah.
That's how you do it. So you do it in the East Coast after October 31st when the time changes. It's like, okay, here we go. Darkness. Yeah.
Hey, good to see you, Bart.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. What's new with you?
Just class stuff, basically.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron. Great. See, Veronica's here. Hey, Veronica.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Abigail. So good to see you, Abigail. Wow. It's been a while. Hi, we miss you.
It's good to see you.
Everyone, thanks everybody for coming in. Let's give it another minute and then we'll get started. I suspect this will go like our faculty fellow presentations, which means we won't have enough time no matter what we do. So it may be best just to kind of get started, because you just say short welcome, but maybe you can give us an overview and kind of kick us off, and that'll give us a few minutes for more people to kind of trickle in. But I'm really looking forward to these presentations. I think hopefully we'll have a few of the new fellows who aren't already here join as well, because I think this is a really good moment to kind of get a sense of what PhD work looks like. And as you may know, some of the new USL PhD fellows are new students too. And so, you know, it's always kind of good to get a sense of 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, what your work looks like. And so thanks for taking the time to put all this together, to all of our presenters. And it's really been a pleasure having you in the lab and working with you in some way. So I'll let Chris kind of MC and take this forward. We just wanted to say we're all excited to see your work, and I think it's really useful for the lab in so many different ways. And yeah, tell us what you got. We're excited.
Thanks, Simon. Hi, everyone. So great to see you. Thanks for folks who are joining for the first time as well. I see Claudia's going to join. So tonight we're going to be celebrating our PhD fellows who are wrapping up a year of research in the lab, but also many other kinds of projects and relationships with folks involved in the Urban Systems Lab. And so today's format will be similar to what we did a few weeks ago with the faculty fellows. Each PhD fellow will get about 10 minutes to give us an update on some of their doctoral research and to tell us a little bit about how things are going. I will say it's been a challenging year, and I've been very impressed by everybody's adaptation and ways of working under these kind of constraints and harsh conditions. So just want to thank everyone and just celebrate that. So we're going to kick things off with Jen Ventrella, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about her work first, and then we'll move on to Ava Govantu, and finally Veronica Alavato. And I would just ask that you hold your questions towards the end so we can kind of really create a little bit of time for discussion. And please use the chat throughout just to record any notes, any comments, any things that might come up. We're going to make sure to archive that chat, and also we are recording this session so we can post it up on the website for further use. Great. And I did want to welcome our new faculty, or our new PhD fellows as well. Ray Curtin, Belen Photo, I think, is here, and Audrey Jenkins. They're going to be starting the 2020-21 cycle, as well as Jen is going to be continuing her fellowship. So we're looking eager to hear a bit about their work as they get going. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Jen to get us going, and I'll just try to keep time as much as possible. So about 10 minutes, and I'll give you a little cue, and then we'll switch it over to Abigail.
Sounds great. Thanks, Chris. And feel free to interrupt if I start going over. Hopefully I won't. Okay, thanks everyone. So I'll be talking a little bit about what I've been up to with the PhD Fellowship as part of the Urban Systems Lab. So first is just a brief overview of what I'll talk about today. First, I'll just give a little bit of background about myself. I think most of you know, but for those who don't, I'll do a little bit of overview and then talk specifically about my work with the SETS Convergence Project, and then how that's kind of led and informed me to my future research directions for my doctoral research. So as a brief background, for my graduate studies, I just finished up last year a dual master's at Oregon State University in mechanical engineering and applied anthropology. So I was doing work in technology and engineering for global development, looking at monitoring clean energy technologies. And I'm now at the New School. I'm a PhD student in my second year of the Public and Urban Policy program, studying clean energy and climate policy. So kind of transitioning from the technology side into the policy side. Some of my research interests and focuses in my master's program, I was really interested in looking at human technology interactions and critical data studies. And then more recently, have been looking at questions around equity and environmental justice in climate and clean energy policies. And then I'm really interested in using mixed method approaches that combine qualitative and quantitative ways of looking at problems. So just to go into a little bit of motivation for the research that I've been working on this summer, and I guess throughout the year, the kind of key problem is that there is an increasing severity and frequency of extreme climate events. I think we're all very familiar with that. But then also recognizing that there's been differing responses and strategies from local governments, really globally, but especially in the US is where a lot of the work I've done is focused. And then there's also equity implications of how and where strategies are implemented and distributed. So some of kind of the smaller projects that I've been working on as part of the fellowship include doing a review of modeling efforts to calculate the hospitalization and health-related costs of heat-related illness, looking at mortality and morbidity. I also did an exercise in GIS mapping of heat risk in New York City, and then comparing that to were areas where there were higher heat risk correlated to where more green infrastructure projects are being distributed. And then I've also been working on supporting the SETS Convergence project, which is what I'll focus on for the rest of this presentation. So as a bit of a background into the Convergence project, it's an NSF funded project that a consortium of universities, including the New School, are a part of. And really the problem that they're looking at and trying to address is the fact that there's this risk in taking siloed approaches to mitigating or adapting to climate resilience. And so the kind of framework that they propose to look at resilience instead is the social, ecological, technological framework where all of these pieces interact with one another. So just as a brief example, there's a proposed installation of a flood wall along the East River, which is a technological solution, but it has social and ecological consequences and trade-offs, because in order to build that flood wall, they would have to get rid of a park that's there. So that, of course, is an ecological as well as social consequence that is impacting people within that neighborhood. So that also kind of brings about those equity implications. So the kind of overarching research questions of this grant is looking at how SETS domains interact to create vulnerability or resilience, and then also how could they be more resilient, equitable, and sustainable. So this grant is being investigated, and these questions are being looked at in 4 case study cities, which are Atlanta, New York, Phoenix, and San Juan. The work I've done is specifically focused in New York. And this is intended to be a 5-year project, and so there's a lot of different components to it, including different simulations and modeling of infrastructure and infrastructure vulnerabilities, looking at future visions of climate resilience, and then also conducting a governance analysis to see how that's being framed. And that is the piece that I'm specifically focusing on and have been working on. And then within the governance analysis, looking at doing a content analysis of existing governance documents. So to go into that a little bit, I've been looking at strategies for both heat and flooding in New York City. So this is to answer kind of an integrated research question within the Convergence grant, which is what are the predominant strategies and then the range of strategies that are envisioned by government actors. And again, this is specifically looking at New York City. So I, advising from Timon and Elizabeth Cook at Barnard, conducted a content analysis of 7 New York City government's documents. So on the right, we looked at the Cool Neighborhoods NYC report and the One NYC 2050 report, as well as several others that are generally used pretty consistently with planning and that are more in use. And then what we did was go through each plan and extract climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies. And then what the plan is eventually is to analyze them and code them for things like hazard types. So are they proposed strategies to address heat or flooding, or maybe a combination of both? What kind of solutions are they in terms of, are they social, ecological, technological, or some sort of combination? And looking at resilience characteristics, as well as a bunch of other things that are integrated into this code book. So just to give a few examples of, there were over 300 strategies that were extracted from these 7 plans. So this is just a brief selection of a few, just to give kind of a sense of what types of things New York City municipalities and the governments are thinking about. So for flooding strategies, one of the things that they're looking at is for the Department of Environmental Protection to expand the Staten Island Blue Belt, which is a wetland that helps to filter stormwater and help mitigate flooding. And then another one is the city will harden transportation services, sewers, and wastewater treatment plants. So you can see kind of this mix of strategies, both on more of the hard infrastructure technological side, as well as the ecological side. And then the same kind of goes for heat strategies, where one thing that they've proposed is this Be a Buddy neighborhood check-in system, where people would check in on their neighbors during heat emergencies to make sure that they're safe. So this is, again, more on the social side, but then also supporting an investment in planting trees and parks, which offer a cooling effect. So that's more of an ecological strategy. And you can also see that these types of green infrastructure interventions also could be used to help mitigate flooding as well. So that kind of dual purpose strategy can also be assessed. And then really what I'd like to do with these, and what these have kind of informed in terms of my future work and informing the doctoral research that I'd like to do. So this has been really largely in support of direct convergence research, but what I'd like to develop it into is looking at these research questions of, how do urban governance stakeholders frame the problem of climate risks? And then how do these narratives result in the proliferation of certain types of adaptation and mitigation responses? And then finally, what are some of the resulting equity implications of these strategies and framings? So to investigate this, I'd like to look at, and was inspired by this paper from Stephanie Wakefield, who used to be a faculty member at the New School. And I think, Veronica, you shared this paper. But what she looks at is how, after Hurricane Sandy, government actors framed what the problem was, and then kind of framed that we needed certain solutions, especially infrastructural solutions, to address it. So this is kind of modeled off her work, this idea. And so to look at it, I'd like to use the method of discourse analysis and look through things like governance documents, which I've already started doing by extracting strategies, and then analyzing them and looking at other kind of artifacts like newspapers and social media, to look at kind of how narratives result in different types of responses, using more ethnographic data, such as semi-structured interviews to talk to different stakeholders. And then finally, to help inform some of the equity implications, perhaps looking at GIS mapping to see distributional impacts of these strategies. So this is, of course, a work in progress, and I'm looking forward to continuing with the Urban Systems Lab to continue to develop some of these. And I know we're saving our questions till the end, so that'll close out, and thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Jen. That was like right on 10 minutes. Wow. Fantastic. All right, so we're going to move on to Ava Govantu to share a little bit about her work, and then we'll hear from Veronica next. Please feel free to use the chat for any questions or comments throughout.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone. I think I know about 2/3 of the group, so happy to be here, and nice to meet everyone I don't know so far. So I think I presented last time. Actually, I couldn't remember the date. I think it was maybe May or April. So a little while after the doctoral fellowship was announced, and sort of I think the plan then was to sort of like mostly present my plan. So as I'm going to, discuss soon, I think my long-term plan is still the same, but for the short term, I did took a little bit of a, things took a little bit of a turn, I think, because of COVID and because of discussions with Timon that felt like, maybe we need to follow some of, the ongoing events. So I'm going to discuss that a little bit. So my name is Abigail Bantu, as Chris said, and yeah, I'm, I guess, really short intro. And if you have any questions at all about me or anything, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to do that really, really short because I only have 10 minutes. So I'm a doctoral student at Milano. By training, I'm an urban data scientist, and my main focus is to conduct spatial analysis related to public spaces, human behavior, and the built environment, which goes, basically whatever data I need to access and whatever methodology in order to, understand some of those type of questions. So my original, idea for the fellowship was to, develop my dissertation and start to work on my dissertation proposal. And I guess the main idea, and that was maybe the last thing you guys heard from me. My plan at the time, and still is for the future, is to basically create a classifier to determine where, street design changes are needed, start with New York and hopefully scale up to other cities in order to understand, better understand trees distribution in the city, thinking about equity. But like I said, I did shifted into working on other projects, and I will present, the main thing I was sort of doing, as well as if we have a little bit more time, I can, also mention other small projects. So the main part of this presentation, I'm going to talk about a project I worked on, and here I want to mention, I think she's not here unfortunately, but this project was collaborative work with Sarah Jane McIntyre, which was I was introduced to by the USL lab, and was a really great collaboration, and just really great person to work with. So I do want to mention her while I present the work. And we did this project during the summer and a little bit during the fall. And sort of in short, what we did is we conducted a proximity analysis to understand New York City's open streets program, where our main drive was to understand issues of access to public spaces or places for social distancing during the stay-at-home period. This idea, I think, was I started thinking about this idea back in May, when I think a lot of the things that us as urbanists sort of feel and think about the city were really questioned and shaken. So I think just trying to brainstorm and see how anything related to data can bring some insights and understanding to this challenging situation that the city was in, and all of us as well, of course. So in terms of the open streets plan, back in April, Mayor de Blasio announced a plan to make as many as 100 miles of roadbeds available to pedestrians, bikers, as well as delivery services. So that's how the program started. And generally speaking, at the time, the idea was that those streets were going to be closed between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. With an exception for emergency cars, etc., that will be able to access it at any time. But basically, those streets will be designated during the daytime for pedestrians and cyclists. Over time, there have been a lot of changes in terms of added functionalities, and I guess the city has evolved and changed in terms of a little bit about the process, but also in terms of these functionalities, and a lot of what we see now that was only partially accounted for in our analysis is the open restaurants plan that you all, if you're in the city or even read about the city, you probably experienced those open streets that are dedicated for restaurants now. In terms of the placement of the open streets, so, according to the mayor's office, this is a collaboration of the decision making process between the mayor's office, the New York City Council, NYPD, Parks, New York City Department of Transportation, as well as some local community organization with, specific emphasis or mention of the business improvement districts that are also referred to as BIDs, and I'm going to refer to them, if you guys don't mind, as BIDs from now on. These methods is intended, to say, to speak to, I think the city has responded very fast to a crisis, and I think there was really a thinking around creating a bottom-up approach where, the community is involved. The problem is that these methods, although they do attempt to prioritize communities, they actually disproportionately serve some communities over others. And specifically, what we're going to, try to, reveal, discover, explore during this project is that, the BIDs are mostly located around around the city CBDs, central business districts, and not really equally around all the city neighborhoods. So that's where some of the bias and some of maybe unintended bias came into life. In terms of this more broadly, the open streets plan, many of other cities, some of them, were influenced by New York City, but really cities all across the globe. And there's like I found someone who's keeping track of it. There's like a spreadsheet, a shared spreadsheet. Basically, there are hundreds of them. I think at the point we have some version of streeteries or converted streets. So as an example for streeteries, for example, in Boston, Massachusetts, in Jersey City, New Jersey, and Tampa, Florida, all those implemented streeteries back, I think, in June or July, as well as Austin, Texas, and Ann Arbor, Michigan, that have created conversions of parking lots into retail areas. In terms of the functions of the, I really hope this is muted. In terms of the functions, it's just a video I took a few weeks ago, actually maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I think that was back in August, but that's Vanderbilt Avenue in Brooklyn, in Prospect Heights. So basically the functionality of open streets really vary from street to street. And at the time of our analysis, the categories were protected bike lane, neighborhood open street, park adjunct, intra-park, and neighborhood partner. Today, there are new open street categories such as outdoor learning. So that's part of the idea is, for schools, for students to be able to interact and have some sort of option of teaching outdoors because that's considered safer. As well as I said, an open restaurants program, which is basically initiated by individual food establishments, and open streets restaurants, where the distinction is that the latter refers to community-based organizations and BIDs that request, a full closure of the street for a few hours a week, a day, depending on the request. So this example here is, as you can see, is the open street restaurants program, where the entire street is being closed, in contrast for of having seating on the sidewalk and in the first lane of the street.
Abigail, just a 1 minute warning here.
Oh, really? Oh no. All right. Okay, so really fast, I guess, just to talk a little bit about BIDs. How can I put it really shortly? I guess the bottom line is to understand that those BIDs, they are non-for-profit, but they're not really distributed, as you can see, equally around the city. There are only 76 of them. Many of them are in Midtown and downtown Manhattan, as well as downtown Brooklyn. And according to research, a paper from Dr. Meltzer from the school, 77% of the census tracts with BID presence have found to be have higher assessed value than the average in the city. So that's where sort of like we begin to understand that maybe there's potential this, like if the bids are those that have a lot of power in deciding where those open streets are happening, there's a potential for an unequal distribution, basically. I have to get to the mini analysis part, so I'm just going to yeah, this is just an overlay. So I guess that was my main point, just to have an overlay, and I can share those slides later on, just because if anyone has, well, I guess in the question I can the question part. So basically that's the proximity analysis that was conducted, and what it means is basically I wanted to measure how many bids are falling within or closer or close to those open streets. And again, this is this is accurate for May and June, which things have changed a little bit ever since. But just to say really fast before Chris would really be mad, 23%, 23.5% of the 237. Okay, 23%, which are 237 out of the total 1,008 open streets, overlapped with at least one bid. Specifically, like I said, downtown Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and Midtown Manhattan particularly stand out with areas with a lot of open streets prevalence. As many as 58.4, which are 588 out of the 1,008 open street segments were within 500 meters of at least one bid, and more than 80%, 80.6 to be accurate percent, or 813 open streets were located within 1,000 meters, which is also 1 kilometer from a bid. So all that to tell you, and suffice it to say that the other side of those numbers are that a lot of areas that were hard hit, that don't have a lot of access to parks, that happen to be lower income, have really haven't profited from the program as much. And I guess one thing I did skip that I would want to mention is that I think part of the interest in studying and bringing those numbers, striking numbers out there, is that also the way we move and interact with the city has changed. So what the principle of CBDC business districts in the city, and specifically in New York, has really changed because people interact mostly with their close environment. So I think to that end, we just wanted to emphasize that maybe for the concept of bids, when things are normal, it makes sense to develop some areas over others, which also could be questionable. But I think given that most of us, or all of us, are really interacting with a few blocks around our home, it's even more important to consider issues of equity in terms of allowing for social distancing and allowing people to really enjoy the city in a way that some neighborhoods enjoyed more than others. I'm going to, I think, finish with that, and if there's I'd love to share the slides because I have other resources, but yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Abigail. I was sorry to crunch that up, but yeah, I think we can spend weeks talking about all these issues. Really fascinating though. Great. So we're going to move on to our last presenter, Veronica, and I know that she's doing a lot of work around coastal resiliency, and she's going to give us a kind of an update on that, and then we'll have about 15 minutes or so for question and answer. Take it away, Veronica.
Thank you, Chris. I sort of forgot to say who I am in my presentation, so I'm just going to briefly say it here. I'm Veronica Livato. I have a background in urban development and earlier on in tourism, ecotourism specifically. And I'm in my third year in my PhD pathway and to Milano. And here, what I want to show and share with you is sort of beginning of my dissertation proposal, which is clearly in progress, and where I focus on the social justice implications of planning for coastal resilience infrastructure in New York City. Now, for those of you who have listened to my presentation when I was assigned a fellowship, by the USL, I made many changes, mostly related to data availability and wanting to focus on my strengths more specifically. At the USL, I've been working on many things. Some were part of the fellowship, some are not. But I worked on a neighborhood analysis as part of the Stormwater Resilience Project. This was a project that was funded by New York City Planning. Later on, I started working on a collaborative paper that was published this year with Pablo and Z and Timon on flood risk distribution in New York City. And then this year, I worked on more softer stuff like opinion pieces for Medium and The Hill with Bart, which was great. And now I'm really trying to focus on my dissertation proposal. Now, just to give you a bit of a background, so in terms of when we think about climate justice, we normally think about the issue of justice internationally, climate justice internationally, and that is normally understood as the differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in terms of CO2 emissions. But we can also think about climate justice in terms of the social distribution of climate change impacts, which largely happen locally across diverse geographies and histories. And by histories, I mean histories of investment and disinvestments in specific areas and peoples. So at the same time, I think it's also important to understand that it's not just the impacts that are differentially distributed, but it's also the kind of resilience and adaptation options that policymakers and designers put in place that are differentially distributed. And we know very little actually about how the social policies that are changing around this, for instance, like social policies around the construction standards in floodplain, how they actually affect the people of different social economic backgrounds. So my focus in this thesis is coastal resilience infrastructure planning. Initially I wanted to focus on the Rebuild by Design competition, which started in 2014. But I quickly realized that the information I need to assess this program, especially from the point of view of the citizens that participated in this design process, is really not available, and I risk losing a lot of time getting it without much results. So I still want to focus on coastal resilience planning, and I'm trying to figure out how I should do that. But just to tell you, the promise of coastal resilience planning is largely connected to the idea of social and ecological benefits embedded into infrastructural projects that are delivered and designed by different sets of stakeholders, including policy officers, researchers, and designers. And the idea is here to reduce the impacts of coastal flooding by also creating jobs and economic revitalization, especially focusing on the most vulnerable populations and areas first, who are already subject to different environmental justice issues, and who also should have access to jobs and areas and sort of should benefit from coastal resilience benefits. But we know that these new governing paradigms come with social spatial implications, such as an even distribution of protected infrastructures and promised economic revitalization, but also they could further entrenching existing racial inequalities through increasing property values for white middle classes. So what I'm now trying to focus on is to look at some of the efforts that the New York City Mayor's office has been putting in place. They're all pretty new, and they involve environmental justice issues as well as climate change issues more specifically, and resilience at large. So these are three new developments. I have found some information about them, and Timon is involved in a few. And I'm trying to understand, there's very little known about the climate resilience exchange. So my idea here is to sort of try to understand whether I could embed myself in all three of them, or perhaps only one, and to try to understand the justice implications of these participatory and collaborative policymaking exercises. So the question I want to ask is, how has the involvement of a broader set of municipal agencies, advocacy groups, and researchers affected the justice implication of coastal resilience policy design? The way I want to answer this is by looking at recognitional justice, by asking to what extent are identities, experiences of vulnerable groups, and historical inequities in accessing resilience goods acknowledged in collaborative policymaking and programs. And I also want to ask a procedural justice question. So to which degree has stakeholder engagement fostered dialogism in organization and implementation procedures, approval, and ability to influence outcomes of diverse stakeholders and justice advocacy groups? I can sort of go into, I think this is the last slide I'm going to present, because I could go on and unpack more, but I think I want to just give you a flavor of the kind of theoretical foundations that I'm building this work on. So first of all, climate justice. So by that, I mean identifying, foregrounding, and understanding the needs of individuals and groups most marginalized in the face of the impacts of climate change and our responses to it. Then I want to embed social justice theory, which really comes from cultural theory, into this idea of climate justice and urban climate resilience. So the key thing to understand here is that there's a mutual relationship between recognitional justice and procedural justice. So the more we recognize identities, emerging identities of different groups, as in terms of race, their class, their age, their gender, the more theoretically the procedural process should be just. And so theoretically the participatory process should be more diverse and more inclusive. Hence, the distribution of goods in terms of, if we're talking about resilience, in terms of environmental amenities, in terms of protection, infrastructural protection, should be more equally distributed. So I'm largely going to focus on frameworks used by Nancy Fraser back in the late 90s, but then that are being now reused in the context of climate resilience by Susan Merrill. I'm going to focus on the idea that resilience is contested and it's negotiated by different stakeholders, and therefore we need to ground ourselves in this issue of procedure and how just these procedures are. And I'm also going to take from science and technology studies in a very sort of utilitarian way, how can we study procedure? And I'm going to look at issues of dialogism of procedure. And by dialogism, I mean, instead of thinking about delegative procedure, which an example of it will be the vote, which is it's very non-collaborative. I want to look at how these procedures are actually creating a dialogue between different stakeholders, and also the quality of the implementation of these procedures in terms of, the location of where these meetings are taking place, their diversity in terms of language, and so forth. And so technically, all this should lead to better distribution of goods and benefits. Chris, how am I doing?
Got 1 minute left. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, this is the grant framework that I'd like to look into. Maybe I will give you just some ideas. I'm actually not sure what I should really be saying, but say in 1 minute, maybe I'll show you just this idea that I'm building around distribution, procedural justice. So here, the idea that I'm building is, if I'm looking at these 3 advisory groups, right, or maybe even just one, I'm trying to figure out what I'm interested in is to try to understand, grounding in science technology studies framework, how are these groups coming together? Like, are they by aggregation? So by a sort of filtering out of different representatives of groups and then arriving at a selection of people, or are they by composition? So the groups are sort of uncertain and there's new people that are allowed in at certain point in times, depending on how needs arise. And also to look at how dialogic this process is, and how it allows for possible identities, different identities to emerge of the people that are part of this advisory group, and how they allow for different interpretations of resilience. I think I'm gonna stop here, and I can show a little bit more of the operationalization that I'm doing if you have questions about it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Veronica. I know 10 minutes is not a lot to cover all the things. So Jen and Abigail and Veronica, if there's anything you want to maybe clarify or add before we get into questions, we have a few minutes. And then if folks have any thoughts, we can move on to questions too. Did you want to add anything, Abigail or Jen, or just to clarify?
I think, if people have questions, I can, I'll know better where did I fail, I guess.
No, you did great. You did great. So let's open it up. Yeah, there's a supportive space here. So what did folks think? Any questions come to mind for Jen, Abigail, or Veronica?
I do have a question. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for the three of you for these wonderful presentations. I felt very compelled by Abigail's work. I don't know, like, I guess the thing that I was thinking was like whether you have thought about continuing your, study on open streets around maybe something more focused on also like how those streets can become like new niches for any sort of climate change adaptation measures, such as, new spaces where specific interventions can happen or ecosystem services can be implemented, as new spaces where a lot of new things can happen.
Yeah, I think definitely yes. I think the short answer is yes. And I think part of, and I also mentioned that I think very briefly during the presentation, is part of, the excitement and the passion about this project is that, it's like really felt like, we're doing something in real time. But I think it was also, sort of the challenge, because it felt like, that like it was enough that, I was working on a visualization from yesterday, and I realized the data was already updated. So I updated a few times, and then the functionality started changing. So I think I have a lot of, what, to your question, to be more specific, I think there's definitely a lot there. And also I think at least some section of this open restaurants has been announced to sort of stay indefinitely. So I think there is definitely, an opportunity to, really understand how can that impact the city environmental wise. I haven't put enough thought into it, but I think part of what I was interested or think can be done in the future is, accessibility analysis, maybe thinking about also maybe, relating parks to OpenStreet. That was part of the initial idea. So I'm definitely thinking about, the catchment area, or the, basically thinking about how those open streets are enhancing or not people access to public spaces is something that I'm definitely interested to in exploring in the future. So yeah, thanks for your question.
I got a comment / question for Abigail too. So I wonder, given that, I mean, it's not that many of the streets are open streets, but I wonder if the city is actually thinking of measuring air quality or particulate matter of some kind in these streets, given that there's some level of reduced traffic and reduced I assume idling of cars because there's less space for cars to be idling in. I wonder if they're actually doing that, given that the city does have like initiatives to reduce idling time of cars and stuff like that right now.
I think great question, and unfortunately I have no idea.
And I guess my other follow-up, or not really follow-up, unrelated question was, when you were doing your proximity analysis, were you just using sort of like the as the crow flies distance, like just like straight up distance between the closest district and the open streets, or were you using sort of like a network of like shortest paths, sort of like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that was that was my point when I sorry if it wasn't more clear. My response to Pablo I think that yeah, I did not account for it wasn't a network analysis. It was a proximity that did not accounted for distance, driving distance, walking distance, etc. So I think that's something that is almost straightforward to do in order to make this analysis really more meaningful. Especially, I think walking distance is the crucial point, especially when we're thinking about people interacting with their own neighborhoods. What can they access within 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes walking distance? So I think that's I did not do that, and I should do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pauline, for those who don't know me, and I just want to say congratulations to all the presentations. Like, it's amazing. I saw V1, the version 1, like in March, or I don't even know when that was, and so much phenomenal work has gone into it. Like, this is exciting, all of you. Yeah. And Abigail, I did have a question which was related to Pablo's. It was like in terms of like, this is so right now. I wonder how it can like inform like policy, like and things like that. Because I know like the New York City like digital, is it called like Innovations, has a project that is related to something like this in terms of like how people are using like spaces outside or something connected to that. I may be loosely speaking, but this is like, it's very exciting. Well done.
Yes, yeah, sorry. Thanks, Glenn. Nice to see you, by the way. And thank you so much for the question. So I'm not familiar with the program you mentioned, so I'd love to, learn more about it. I think again, thinking about access, and I think, more traditionally thinking about, how urban planners or geographers consider access, which, more like, access to hospitals, access to schools. So think about translating those type of analysis into thinking about open streets as an amenity and as a basic amenity in our in this time in the city. Should be, I think, how cities should transform their policy making. So, for example, I know the Department of City Planning, they do some sort of, in order to understand capital planning, they do some sort of analysis into basically they want to make sure that every New Yorker is within, I don't remember how many number of minutes walking distance from a small park, a medium park, a large park. So I think the same should be incorporated into open streets, and especially to compensate for those areas that lack in public spaces. But I think more broadly was also the point about the BIDs, the business improvement districts, having more control, more of a say over those type of policies is something that is unfair, because that sort of creates an imbalance situation where some areas that don't have those community groups are sort of automatically disadvantaged.
Okay.
I actually have a question. Can I ask a question to Jen?
Yeah.
So I was curious how are you, I mean, maybe you haven't thought about it yet, but I'd like to talk to you about discourse analysis as a method to sort of understanding how sex is talked about in policy. I'm wondering, who are you looking at in terms of author? Are you thinking of discerning between narratives and sort of like underlying ideologies, or I think it's the framework that actually we study in our course, or what are your ideas around how you can use discourse analysis?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I think it's still definitely in development, but I was inspired by, we were reading about it in our critical praxis course, like the new one that combines policy design and development. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. But I definitely love to talk more about it and kind of see what some of the other options are.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just to relate it to that, I was gonna have the same question to Jen and maybe a suggestion for in terms of methodology. So since you have the set of strategies extracted from the documents, and also you are looking to incorporating diverse stakeholders' perspective in it, I was wondering if you heard about the Q methodology. So it's basically you have a set of statements that you gather from diverse of literature or maybe like pre-interview data with the participants, and then you ask the participants to rank them in comparison of all different statements that you have or strategies, and then you do a component analysis and then trying to build a discourse out of the statistically significant factors of those statements. So I thought it would be a really useful methodology for your research question, and then I use this for my PhD dissertation study. So I would love to talk more about this if you're interested to use that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks so much. I'm lightly familiar with it, but I've never used it before, so would love to talk about it more.
There's a question here from Luis too, Jen. I don't know if you saw that in the chat, but he's asking about the similarities between plans and across boroughs or agencies.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we need to do more in-depth analysis on the plans, but as I was extracting them, I noticed that they were fairly consistent between the agencies, and a lot of them had overlap like within separate plans, which you could see when you skim through the whole spreadsheet. In terms of when you mean consistency between boroughs, do you mean like borough level plans or more like strategies implemented within each borough?
I guess both. I assume if there's like a borough specific strategy, it comes from the borough, but that might not be the case. I don't know enough, but yeah, so we only looked at city level plans, but we do have a running list of neighborhood level and some, I think, borough level plans, which we haven't extracted strategies for yet, but definitely that could be done. And then you could compare across and look at the differences between them, which I know there's been some interest in. So yeah, we haven't done that yet, but there's a possibility for it.
And I guess a follow-up, I got someone off. Well, a small follow-up is, so do the neighborhood level plans come up to address gaps in the city level plans, or are they sort of just looking at different priorities? Or
yeah, I haven't looked at them in great depth, but there are some plans that come out of like environmental justice groups. There's like a climate resilience plan that really centers equity, which makes sense for it being a climate justice group. I haven't gone through the plan in depth, but Elizabeth and I had been talking about maybe there's definitely space for looking at that and kind of comparing the priorities of those plans and what might be missing from like a governance document. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Do you have a question for Veronica as well in the chat? Yep.
I saw it. Thank you, Audrey. Yes, so will I focus on the three committees I mentioned? I would love to be part of these three committees. I'm discussing with Timon, especially the last one, the Climate Resilience Exchange, but this is really something super fresh, so I have no idea. Actually, it's really critical in a way that I figure out whether I can be, so the three committees are kind of different, or at least they seem. One is on environmental justice, and one of its aim is to conduct the first ever citywide study on environmental justice. And there's 14 members organizations across New York City, one co-chair, which is We Act. The second committee is the independent expert body to the NYPCC, the New York City Panel on Climate Change, on which Simon sits. So it's quite different from the first one. And the third one is the Climate Resilience Exchange, which is supposed to be broader than climate. And I'm not sure what its aims are. There's nothing really published online yet, and so it's all in kind of definition. So it really depends on how I am able to reach out to people in these groups and position myself and make them interested in what I'm doing, I suppose. Some of the first two I mentioned are already ongoing. The third one is kind of beginning now. In terms of methods, well, I mean, largely qualitative methods. So probably, we're talking about in the first group, 14 member organizations. In the second one, 20 people from different universities. The third one, I'm not sure. So probably a set of interviews, probably some analysis of discourse. But yeah, these are still things that the methods are still something I'm trying to figure out. Yeah.
Great. Z had a few questions, so maybe we'll just end with one of those, unless anybody has anything they want to add. Okay, so Z was asking, I think it was for Abigail, about the bike maps and networks. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that, Abigail.
Yeah, so I did not accounted for the larger, bike network. Having said that, at least in the initial OpenStreet project, there was one category which was bike lanes, and I think if you can share it, I guess, but some parts of Williamsburg, at least around the beads there, it seems like they're all like, which is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's sort of interesting. There are some, OpenStreet bike lanes category, which lead directly into beads. So that's sort of, interesting. But I haven't done a larger scale analysis, and I think that's a good point. So thanks for that.
All right, well, I just want to thank all the PhD fellows for their time and presentations today. Amazing job. We'll be having some new fellows present in March of 2021. So I'll definitely keep everybody posted about that. And I'll make sure that this video and all the presentations are posted up on our website, also to follow up as well, in case you want to reference those for the use. And then, of course, if you want to get in touch with any of the fellows, just let me know, and I can always help you get in touch if you don't have their emails as well. But thank you all for attending today. Really wonderful to see everyone. And if you're in the near USL network, we'll be joining, we're having a USL social hour next Thursday. So hopefully you can join us for a glass of wine and hang out in the Zoom room again. All right.
Great. Excellent work, everyone. Have a good evening.
See you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Talk soon, hopefully.
Everyone.